welcome to this Future Tech virtual roundtable from Foodservice Consultant Society International, FCSI. Today we are taking an in-depth look at no less a weighty subject than the future of food service. I'm Michael Jones from Progressive Content and Editorial Director of FCSI's Foodservice Consultant magazine. This roundtable is kindly supported by Welbilt Inc., big thanks to them, and we'll explore the main drivers, the consumer behaviours and the innovations that are shaping the future of food service and their implication on hospitality businesses today and tomorrow. I'm delighted to be joined by two exceptional FCSI professional member consultants and the SVP of New Product Development and Innovation of Welbilt. So firstly, let me ask each participant to introduce themselves and to tell us about their organisation and their area of expertise. Rudy, can we start with you first, please?
Sure. Michael, I'm really happy to be here. Phil, thanks for your sponsorship from Welbilt. The Mick Companies is a longtime member of FCSI. We are management advisory consultants specifically and work in integration with all the design members. And our primary goal at Mick is to build high-performing, highly profitable companies as a whole. So we work with leaders and teams. We work with culture, brand execution, the way we communicate with each other, the way we inspire and engage, and the way we play and perform with money. Our track record is really bulletproof. We typically have companies running 3 to 5 times industry norms, and it's been an exciting career, and I'm excited to be here on the panel.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us, Rudy. And Joe, please.
Hey, good morning. Joe Schumaker with FoodSpace. Michael, thanks so much for having us. Phil, thanks again for support. So yeah, FoodSpace, we focus a lot on B&I. We do a lot of corporate dining work. We do both the design side and also a fair amount of MAS or management consulting. I think for us, really what we're looking at is starting with the food. The food really drives the guest experience, right? So food and guest experience, those are kind of our two big buzzwords, right? And so this topic is definitely something that we are excited about and engage in, and just think about how do we drive our industry forward. You know, and I've said this before, Michael, we've had this conversation about, you know, how far behind are we as an industry in terms of technology? And, you know, I think it's really important that as consultants, we're kind of pushing that thing forward all the time in everything that we do.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us, Joe. And Phil, please.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So my name is Phil Radford. I'm the Senior Vice President of New Product Development and Innovation for Welbilt. I've been with this company for some 14 years now, and throughout my career, I've always been closely related to product development. And Welbilt as a business, as you guys will probably know, we're a pretty big organization in the manufacture of food and beverage equipment across the world. We typically sell $1.5–2 billion of equipment in all sectors across all markets. So we're pretty busy and pretty substantial in that area.
Excellent. Thank you very much for joining us, Phil, as well. Okay, so let's start. Can you all maybe just let our viewers know the state of play with regards to the food service project work that you're working on currently as we emerge on the downslope out of the pandemic? Are you very busy? Is it a mixed bag in terms of workflow? Is the industry still taking time to get back on track? And also, what is your future slate looking like? So Rudy, if you could tell us first, please.
Sure. What is interesting to me, it feels, first of all, we're very busy, which is exciting. We've watched from the very beginning of the process through now, companies that are anticipatory, companies that had a war chest, that were asking questions of what is next, to Joe's point, anticipating innovation, anticipating what's next. That is continuing in our bet all over the world. We're working in 6 different countries right now, plus all over the US. Our work is predominantly shifted, I think, in the last 6 months to coaching and working with leadership teams. Certainly travel has been diminished. So we're using technology, Zoom and other like technologies, getting to the point where for all of us, I think it's pretty obvious that Zoom is, or technology, virtual meetings is the future. So that kind of process that kind of technology, looking at three things. What do we need to anticipate? What do we need with the labor stuff that you talked about earlier? What do we need to do to engage our team, let alone engage our clients that are out there? And for our end user clients, how are they engaging? So what's next in innovation in a line? So on one level, nothing's changed about the work. We're still looking at kind of best of class for whatever the utility is, or the scope might be in a project. But second is, how do we engage with that and inspire people along the way? I would say that those are the questions, and the given is profitability in the process.
Great answer. Thank you so much, Rudy. Same question to you as well, please, Joe.
Yeah, I think there's some things that are very similar to, call it 2019 pre-pandemic, if you want to call it that. I think there's a lot of things that are different though, because the questions that we're getting asked and the things that we're looking at have to do with the pandemic, right? And I think that no matter what anybody says, so yes, we are very busy. I think the last 6 months has shown that people are ready to get done and move on. And I think really what we're staring down the barrel of, if you want to call it that, is we're being asked to be even more of an expert than we were before, because now they want us to have our crystal ball and they want us to predict what the next wave is going to look like. How do we build something that's sustainable if there is another shutdown, or if there is, will salad bars exist in perpetuity, right? Like, these are some of the questions that come up. And I've said all along from the beginning of this thing is that, people are creatures of habit, and it takes a while to break and change a habit. But now, with the length of how, where we're at in the progress of the pandemic, I think people are just, every pun intended, they're hungry to get back to their sense of norm. I mean, look at when sports arenas opened back up, they were sold out and people packed themselves in with no masks on, even at the height of some of the worst Omicron cases, right? So I think that at the end of the day, it's going to take a long time to get back to whatever we would consider normal to be. But I think people are excited, people are encouraged, and even though there's a lot of challenges, I think people are hungry to move the industry forward. And I think that's the key to this.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Joe. So, Phil, we've heard from our consultants there. They both sound very, very busy and see lots of change on the horizon. Is it the same view from you as a manufacturer?
Oh, absolutely. Demand for our equipment has gone completely crazy, and something far beyond where we forecast in the depths of the most recent recession. We as a responsible equipment manufacturer start making forecasts of material demands a number of periods or years out, and we are well above where we expected to be in that forecast, and that is being problematic for us. If you think about our order lead times for traditionally 2 or 3 week ordered items, we're talking about 5, 6, 7 months now. We have a really large order book, which is a good problem to have, but it's leading to unprecedented lead times across many of our categories. But we understand that some things are more urgent than others, and where things really are urgent, we move things around to accommodate this, obviously, and it always comes down to materials being available, which continues to be our biggest challenge. Materials and people availability are the two biggest challenges we have.
Great answer. Thank you, Phil. So, I mean, one of the key things you talked about there is those unprecedented lead times. Let's focus on some of the other kind of, I guess, really seismic challenges the industry is facing at the moment. So if we could all just have answer this one, let's look at the biggest headaches your clients are experiencing right now and these key factors that are shaping, I guess, the next decade ahead. Rudy, let's start with you first, please. What are some of those really big headaches your clients are currently experiencing?
Well, I really appreciated what Joe said just a few minutes ago, right? To me, there seems like we're sitting, instead of an either or, what do I do in the moment? Kind of yes or no, black and white answers. We're dealing much more with both and. How do I perform now, shorthanded? And how do I anticipate? So innovation, the concept of innovation is, a lot of what we're doing is looking and calling it an environmental scan, looking out 6 months, looking out a year. It's not if something's going to happen, it's when is it going to happen. So that both and process is, I think, the new norm for our clients. So big headaches, obviously labor, obviously the lead time that Phil was talking about, our production, our development in either new project design or remodels is now not 120 days, it might be a year, right? So how do we forecast cash? How do we look at and inspire teams? And for us in predominantly MAS focus, how do we engage and keep our people? And that cultural process is at the heart of everything, I think, of the, if I had to boil it down, I think the biggest change is for us as leaders to look in a mirror and ask, what do we do differently? Just like Phil's doing with his equipment, what's next coming? What do we do differently as leaders to engage the team we've got and get new team members? To me, that's the biggest single hurdle. The cash flow issues and the production cycles, that'll take care of itself just with patience and the process.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Rudy. Joe, same question to you. What are some of the big challenges, the big headaches that your clients are experiencing at the moment?
You mean there's something bigger or different than what's already been said? No, I think the only thing I would add is that there is, it's that we thought we knew what the process was to be nimble, to be agile, to be flexible and adaptable. And you know, when you start talking about, was anybody prepping for a pandemic? No, nobody thought that this was going to happen, right? And so now those are the conversations. And so I think it's how do we, with labor challenges and supply chain issues and rising cost of goods and how do we stay nimble and adapt? And so I think the challenge is building sort of new foundational infrastructure in that, in how you lead your team and how you build a program. And on the design side, and you know, at some point we get asked this all the time, like, what's changing in design? I think if you were designing responsibly over the last 8 to 10 years, let's just use any XYZ cafeteria. So if it's, whether it's corporate dining, whether it's higher ed, whether it's a school, whatever it is, right? You were designing already stations that could be flexible. In other words, they could be self-service or full service, just using that as an example. So flexibility, I think, is really the thing that, you know, is the biggest challenge, because now, again, you're getting asked to have your crystal ball ready, you know, and make predictions about the unknown. And I think that's, aside from labor and supply chain, that's probably the only other, you know, real big thing that I think we're trying to figure out how to tackle.
Thank you, Joe. Phil, Joe mentioned some keywords really about the need for everyone in this industry to be more flexible, more adaptable, more nimble to face these kind of challenges. Can these challenges, the significant challenges that the industry has faced in the last couple of years, can it actually force the industry to recalibrate for the better? Can this kind of shaking things up, can it help us to be more creative, to be more nimble, more reactive, adaptable? Can good things come out of it? I'm thinking of that cliche about diamonds being formed under pressure. Does that apply here at all?
I think it can be in some areas. If you think about what you're trying to get to, if you're a food service operator, you want your raw ingredients, you want your equipment, you want your demand to be there, and you want to be able to work reliably. Across our industry, we have that same sort of mix of things that we need. So we need materials, we need people, we need energy to create our things, and those things are all going in the wrong direction for a manufacturer like us. So we find that we are using more of our engineering and product development resources, our innovation resources, to keep up with demand. We're refocusing people that would typically spend 80% of their time creating new stuff into sourcing alternative components for our current existing manufacturing. So there is a little bit of a negative connotation to this huge volume requirement that we have at the minute. But it does mean we're getting more aware of our pinch around innovation resources. So I think from a positive side, from a manufacturer like us, or a designer or manufacturer like us, I think we'll have more recognition for the amount of time it takes to really design and develop good products. Because at the moment we're not doing as much as we historically would have done in previous years.
Yeah.
Excellent answer. Thank you, Phil.
If I dare throw my voice back in again, I really appreciate what Joe and Phil just said, right? This process of, I've got to have something that works, but I've also got to have flexibility. That piece of how do we anticipate, because it's not if, it's what we've learned, I think, is it's when the next thing is going to interrupt us. And so that nimbleness and anticipation is going to come out of the business culture, the way we look at design, the way we make decisions. So without restating the whole thing, it just really applied what was said about that nimbleness is looking in a mirror and anticipating, not pretending it's going to be business as usual. There's no going back to normal.
No, there is not. And to that end, Joe, let's look at some of the solutions, some of the initiatives that you have helped to put in place with your clients. Can you talk about how you've addressed some of these challenges of the last couple of years that have got your clients back on the front foot? What have you done?
Yeah, so I think, and again, some of this started pre-pandemic, right? Years ago when I started FoodSpace, my vision, my thought process was, how does MAS and design kind of meld together and create one seamless project, right? And so I think really for me, I have changed some of the types of projects that we do, where the original thought process was it was design only, and I'm bringing in some management techniques, some advisory techniques where we're actually taking a step back from the project early on. And so let me use some specific examples of how this might work. So what would normally be sort of architectural style programmatic work, where, okay, we're getting a space plan and we're trying to figure out how to make things work in the space. We're diving deeper into what the program needs to be. And I think Rudy said it before, looking at 6 months, looking at a year, looking at 3 years, looking at, are we building a 10-year space, and what does that space need to be capable of doing within that decade? And those are the things that we're talking about now as it relates to specific design. Flexibility in stations. I'm going to use one big thing that I think a lot of design consultants don't think about is, what if I need to change out a piece of equipment under a hood? What if this facility needs a walk system down the road? What if they need an additional combi oven, right? Or whatever. How do I supply additional infrastructure now, which is significantly less expensive to build now than it will be to try and retrofit in the future? And so these are things that we've been doing well before the pandemic, but I think what the pandemic's done is it's made it a little easier to sell to the client too, to help them understand kind of why these things are important. The last point I'll make on this is, and this is actually something I'm going to talk about in my session in Montreal, is putting data-rich infrastructure into back-of-house kitchens is something that I don't think design consultants have really spent enough time thinking about the why. We're not building kitchens for today, we're building kitchens for a decade from now. And if we don't think that robotics and automation and camera systems and sensing technology isn't going to be flooded throughout back of house within the next 3 years, we're crazy. And so if we're legitimately building 10-year spaces, we need to be bringing in large data pipelines into back of house kitchen spaces right now during design. And the only people that can be talking about that is design consultants, because the architects aren't thinking like that. The end user's not thinking like that. We're the only ones that can do that.
Great answer. Thank you, Joe. And by extension to that, Rudy, what sort of clever ideas have you seen your clients take, maybe from other sectors who have put things into place that have, obviously the pandemic affected every industry globally. So have you seen any ideas or taken anything from other areas that have helped your clients?
Yeah, I think there are two big pieces that stand out that I'm happy to share. I want to go as a segue to that back to what Joe just said about robotics and AI. Absolutely. It's coming, and it's coming with a force. Pay attention. And the segue to the question you just asked me, Mike, I think, is that there is an irony with robotics coming, that we're going to actually need to depend on our human, dare I say, resource even more, because there's going to be care and maintenance of the robotics. There's going to be awakeness about how to use that technology to the best of our abilities. So the human performance is going to need to be more, not less, even though we might have fewer people on staff, right? So there's that counterintuitive irony. The segue that I would say to your question, both out of our industry, but also in the work that we've done at Miick for a long, long time, decades, is shifting our financial acuity to daily. We're not waiting for a P&L, a financial statement to come out. It's everything is ancient history by the time a P&L comes out.
Yeah.
So we're actually tracking fiscal performance daily, accrued to the week, accrued to the period, accrued to the quarter, looking out and anticipating. So we're running cash flow and profitability both out 3 months to 6 months, and teaching management teams to look at the numbers as part of their journey, whether they're managers or quote leaders. That both and is happening. The other part tied to the fiscal acuity is, what are the values of the prescribed company? How do we what do we stand for? What do we, if we come back to Welbilt, the quality of and the execution of the equipment, the way the stuff works, we come back to what Joe's talking about, of looking out a long time with how does production function? What are our values that guide us? So thinking of values not as single words, but actual behaviors that are almost spokes in a wheel. How do we communicate with each other? How do we train? How do we anticipate decisions? What is our fiscal well-being, etc.? I could run right down a litany of values that actually hold the company out and use those in our decision making. I'll stop there, but the process of why we exist and how we make decisions, making those decisions daily, anticipating what's coming. And that's a completely different culture than leaders saying, do what I tell you to do.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you, Rudy. Phil, Rudy and Joe both mentioned a number of different areas of technology that are already impacting on the sector hugely. From your perspective as an equipment manufacturer, which new technologies have really changed the game in the last couple of years? What's kind of surprised you with the success of this application as well?
It's an interesting question, actually, Mike. I was thinking about what the guys just said around flexibility and quality of people, or people improvement in their quality. Fewer people are more highly skilled. We've seen equipment become very versatile. Think about, for example, speed ovens, high-speed ovens, microwave combi ovens. They've taken over so many different areas where traditional food service would have been the mainstay. That has enabled front of house operations to have staff be the chef as well as the server. So you have the people who are nice people to talk to, as well as the people who are preparing the food just as people want it. When we talk about flexibility, there's nothing better than that type of appliance, because it can generally make just about everything. Think about other categories, like we're working on a product at the minute where we have a holding station, like a hot well, and it can be hot and cold at the turn of a button. So you have a chilled zone, or it can be a heated zone for holding hot food or cold food. We're working on fridges and freezers that can be fridges or freezers. So an appliance provider will provide you the chilling station, and then the user selects whether it's a fridge or a freezer, and it's instantly changeable whenever you want to, at any time of the day or night. So it can be a fridge or a freezer whenever you need it. I mean, these types of technologies, where they're flexible but they're very well defined, enable some future thinking around things like paper use. We're trialing in some areas a paper use rationale where you don't buy the equipment from us, you only pay us per cook. So you maybe rent the equipment for a few dollars a week, and then every time you cook a toasted sandwich, you pay 20 or 30 cents. And that means that the cost of entry into a market is much reduced for operators. And we think that that comes hand in hand with, as Joe said, you have to be connected. You have to be connected to that appliance to be able to charge per cook. You can't rely on an old-fashioned infrastructure to dial up and say, I've cooked 15 sandwiches today. You need to be able to have it real time, so somebody gets a daily charge on maybe their PayPal account. So those type of things are where we're looking at in quite in depth at the moment.
Some really interesting initiatives there. Thank you, Phil. Joe, Rudy used that expression I really like about behaviours being kind of spokes on a wheel. What have you observed about how changes in consumer behaviour are impacting on this sector and kind of prompting those kind of initiatives that Phil was talking about there? How is consumer power now shaping the future of food service? What are you seeing?
Wow, that's a big question. I mean, I think at some point, look, the guest has to matter with every ounce of everything that we do, right? And so at some point, I think there's consumers are thirsty for what's next, and they're always going to be. And that's not just on the culinary side of the business, that's also on the technology side of the business. So the pandemic's forced us to figure out ways to transport food in a very different way, right? Restaurateurs that never in a million years thought that they were going to be using DoorDash are using DoorDash because they had to survive. And the ones that, again, we've been talking about this nimble, agile thing during the pandemic, right? But now the question is, as we go back to sit down dining in restaurants, do some of these restaurateurs continue to evolve? I think the other part of this is that consumer demand and guest experience are not necessarily the same thing. And what I mean by that is the shift that happened was forced. It was a forced shift to a delivery model, right? For some period of time. That wasn't necessarily what the consumer wanted. That's what they were forced to do. And so now as experts, we have to start also thinking about what does the consumer want? And, again, every one of us that consult in this industry probably has our theory of what the guest actually wants. And so what I think we have to do is be analytical. We need to be ferocious learners. We need to be talking to the guests and the consumers in all of our outlets directly. And this is where we get back to that conversation about the crossover between MAS consulting and design consulting, because the reality is designers sometimes are designing in a vacuum. They don't have all of the information necessary to understand what the guest actually wants. And so I think that's really, it's important for us to be as consultants, be leaders in the industry. I think I maybe deviated from your question a little bit, so I want to get back on track on it for just a second. I think the last thing here, and this is probably the most important thing, is that robotics and automation are very cool, but we know that the consumer, and we've known this now for a few years, after the second or third cup of coffee at Cafe X, they don't care about the robot. And so the thing is that some of these new technologies are really, there's two sides of this story. There's the flashy, showy, I'm not going to call any out by name that I consider flashy, showy, but the ones that are just about the guest experience and the consumer experience. And then there are the ones that are actually making an impact on the labor model.
Yeah.
And I look at those as two very different things. And I think at some point, what we need is new technologies to come in that help with the labor challenges and maybe aren't as focused on the flashy, showy front of house stuff, because we already know that the consumer after a few times doesn't care. And Cafe X is a great example of that. And I will use them by name because the surveys show that the guest cares about the high quality coffee. They don't care as much about the show of the robot after the second or third time.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing as we look to the future of this.
Thank you very much, Joe. Rudy, do you agree with that? Where are the biggest consumer shifts that you're seeing?
Well, another great question, Mike. I want to go back to something Joe said, profoundly simple. The guest, what the customer wants, what our guests want, and the brand experience or the brand engagement to deliver it are two potentially very different things. We rarely talk about that in the context that you just named it, Joe. Spot on, right? So I continually think about, as we in a lot of the trades that are coming out, the robotics AI is going to enhance the guest experience, just like an ATM. Well, guess what? Again, we're back to this both and. Some people love an ATM, and some people really want to go talk to a human being and get money, right? Or whatever a banking relationship is. So to that point, the question is going to be here we have our panel. We've got incredible designers, we've got incredible manufacturers, we've got incredible management installation that integrate rather than isolate in silos. We've got to integrate and go, okay, here's the technology. How does my client or this concept engage the guest? Is the robotic, is that equipment its own story, is its own show, or do we want to deliver it in a different way? This is, Joe, it goes back full circle to, am I a little food court on the corner? I mean, a food cart, or am I a white tablecloth dining room in the old days, right? I mean, it's just, here we are, full circle, within just moving 5 times faster.
Yeah, and Rudy, if I might, I mean, let's add a third layer to your ATM analogy, because the third layer is millennial, Gen Z, maybe even Gen Y or Gen whatever the new one is. But point being that they only want to do mobile banking. They've never actually stepped foot in a bank ever in their life. Everything's in their mobile wallet on their phone already. They don't even carry a credit card anymore.
Yeah.
And so there's actually 3 spans of that right now. And our guest and our consumer sits potentially, you could have a concept that sits in all 3 and has to be capable of catering to all 3.
Well, and then full circle back to Phil, the per use pricing on a piece of equipment, mind blowing, man. Boom! Here's new entry for a new operator of some, whether it's commercial or non-commercial, completely different concept of how do we purchase, how do we lease equipment? Oh my gosh, bang. And then Joe, to your point in that third layer, oh my gosh, here we are again, full circle, educating. What part of our work is educating the guest to, have you ever thought about this? Have you ever experienced this? And that those layers, wherever my money is, right, in my app or Bitcoin or whatever, crypto, wherever that process is, how do we keep expanding, educating, and evolving? There we are. So to that, I think that FCSI talks about that a little bit.
Great answer. Thank you, gentlemen. Phil, to put that back to you then. So Joe was talking there about, rapidly changing consumer behavior, also rapid growth in things like food delivery, the impact that's having on ghost kitchens, virtual restaurants. Both Rudy and Joe are talking at length there. How is that in turn, how are you adapting to those requirements as a manufacturer? How are you staying ahead of those trends before they hit? How are you doing that crystal ball gazing?
Well, it's a difficult topic because food is all about experience. It's all about nourishing the customer, nourishing your guest, giving them something that they need as well as something that they want. When you go to a ghost kitchen, you take away part of that equation, because I find, and it's commonly known, that when you can see somebody producing your food, you enjoy the food more, and when somebody who's producing your food can see you, they produce better food. I mean, that's a well understood relationship between those two parties. When it goes to a ghost kitchen, you either see the food being created or even go to someone that's creating it. So you have to have a better experience from the food itself. So the food potentially has to be even better quality. The packaging becomes even more important because that's part of the experience. It's opening the product. It has to get to you hot. It has to get to you in one piece. It can't be a mess inside of the carton. But from an equipment provider like us, We need to be even more aware of reliability. Because we can't have a ghost kitchen that's self-supporting, breaking down. It needs to be self-cleaning. It needs to be efficient. I think we talked about this before, Mike. We need to think about the electrification of the kitchen. We need to remove gas appliances. Where you have gas, you have extraction needs. Where you have gas, you have other challenges around use in mobile. You can't use gas when it's a mobile appliance, for example. Those type of things are really important. And then when you link it to the front end, the Generation Y, the digital natives, Joe, they do everything mobile. So they have to be able to order everything from their handheld mobile device. So all of our equipment needs to be connected. So we don't need somebody between me on my cell phone ordering a hamburger. We don't need an individual at a machine pressing go saying cook hamburger. We need that connection through these interconnecting cloud systems from my mobile handheld device to a machine somewhere that makes my hamburger that I've just ordered. That needs to be seamless.
And Joe, to Phil's point there, how does technology such as those Phil's just described about connected kitchens and cloud-based solutions, how is that technology ultimately helping food service teams? What are the benefits and the advantages of that kind of technology?
Well, so I think there's two sides to this conversation, right? There's the side of where are we at today, right? Which is sensing technology has gotten very good, right? We can temperature controls and HACCP plans, and what we used to have to log by hand, we no longer have to log before. So that frees up labor. And to one of Rudy's earlier points about quality of labor versus quantity of labor, I think that those things are already there. I think where we need to get to is what Phil actually just described, which is I'm on my phone, I push a button, I order the hamburger, I've paid for the hamburger, and then that goes to the kitchen and the appliance makes the hamburger. There's no human needed in that particular workflow. The human is needed in many other places of that workflow, but that particular workflow, there's not really a human needed. And the craziest part, and one of the things that I'm the most I hate using the word frustrated, but I'm frustrated. The automotive industry has been using robots to build our cars for 40 years. And we can't barely make a hamburger and put it in a box with a robotic arm that's existed for 40 years. And what this has to do with is that the food service industry is, I'm not going to say 40 years behind, but we're probably at least 15 years behind the adaptation of existing technologies into our industry. And so until that catches up, at the end of the day, the connected kitchen isn't about individual appliances being capable of things. It's about the systems of kitchens. And I'm going to make one last point on this. And Phil, I've said this to people at your organization and all of the other organizations on the planet whenever I get the chance. Everybody is worried about their IP. And I get that. And I understand that. Your secret sauce is what makes you you. But at some point, we got to break down the barriers between all of the manufacturers and help the equipment, help the end user, help the consumer by allowing things to talk to each other and work together so that we're not working in silos. I will never design a kitchen ever that's 100% Welbilt. And that's not because you guys are doing anything wrong. That's because my job is to make sure that I'm putting the right pieces of equipment in the right moment for the guest, for the consumer, for the operator, for the whomever downstream. So at some point, what we need to get to, Michael, to get to your connected kitchen question, we need to get to a moment in time where we're all kind of really playing together in the same sandbox with that connection in mind. And that's not that we don't have our own IP that makes this thing better than that thing. It's that we allow them to work in unison and in sync with each other. And when you look at like automotive manufacturing as an example, those borders, those barriers got broken down 30 and 40 years ago. And unfortunately, our industry just has not done that.
Phil, you're right to reply. Do you want to respond to that at all?
Joe's right. We want to try and sell only well-built equipment. I'm disappointed you don't want to install only well-built kitchens, Joe. So I need to work on you a little bit more. But I think about the analogy with car sectors, and I don't know whether you've ever tried to plug in your GM car into a Tesla supercharger. It doesn't necessarily fit. So there is a requirement to protect investments in some areas.
Absolutely.
But my opposite side to that is I'm a big believer in open connections. So where we have a fryer, it should talk to our kitchen management system, but it should also, through an open platform, talk to somebody else's. And where we've worked hard with Welbilt Connect, which is our connected kitchen offer, it actually connects not just to our appliances, but it can connect through interfaces and cloud connections to other companies' cloud, to other companies' appliances. So those cloud-to-cloud connections are something we are fully across when it comes to a connected kitchen. So you will be able to see a well-built kitchen or a well-built controlled kitchen that works with any other appliance as long as it's connected. We've even looked into like Piggypack, an add-on for competitors' equipment where if they're not connectable or they're not connected, we can add transducers to that and actually can go through a module we've created to talk to our system. So we can actually bring in unsmart equipment into our smart network.
Mm-hmm.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Phil. Sorry, Rudy.
Yeah. Well, I think there is another piece here that both Phil and Joe alluded to that we don't talk about very often at FCSI or anywhere in consulting. From a strictly MAS place, right? To Joe's point, oftentimes we're left kind of out in the wings with, well, the design guys work hand in hand with Welbilt and the other equipment manufacturers. And to Joe's point, maybe we have a complete line that is one company. It's very rare, but the great majority of the time, it's exactly what Joe's talking about. It's equipment that we wish was integrated. Here's my point. Is Joe's company and other design members of FCSI and the designers out there are often, those guys, those members will do the hard line spec to pick the equipment. One thing my point that gets missed often is, as an MAS provider, I'm looking out, to Joe's point, 10 years. What happens 6 years? What happens when these pieces of equipment don't integrate? What happens if I have to replace one or the other? And what MAS is doing from an operations place is going, hey, can I count on Phil and Welbilt? Who do I count on? Who is the best of the best for this particular installation and integration? So make no mistake, the MAS members, the management advisory, I call it having a voice in the soft spec. So we may not do the drawings, but we absolutely have a relationship with the quality, the care, the values, all the commitment of stuff that Phil's so beautifully spoken of, right? And that Welbilt stands for, and other members and supporters of FCSI. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox on that, but MAS is integrated with this soft spec as well as a hard spec constantly. Yeah,
that's an excellent point, Rudy. Just staying with you for a moment, Rudy. Let's go back to, I loved in your introduction, you talked about the importance of culture, ingraining that with operators. So let's address the labour crisis in food service and how we fix it. So how do we make this sector a more attractive one for young people and maybe those who are disenfranchised with this sector? Obviously, it's a sector that's provided mass employment for previous generations. What is the answer to building that culture back? How do you fix it? Like your answers, please.
Well, geez, where is my crown and my halo, right? To it. Just a little question.
Just a simple question.
Yeah, there you go. It is a simple question. It's not little though.
No.
Ironically, I think the answer is right in front of us, and I think the answer is simple. It's not easy. It goes back to something that Joe and I both have alluded to on this call of, in the past, and the food service business across all sectors, B&I to commercial, little independent restaurants to big chains, stadiums, whatever. Any element of food service, along with any element of business, the traditional mandate is you're the employee, I'm the boss, do what I tell you to do. And you're lucky to make X dollars an hour. And it is time, to all of our viewers and listeners out there, it is time to reverse the image and look in a mirror and start saying, how am I treating my people? How, it doesn't mean, by the way, give them $25 an hour just to give it to them. It means, what is excellence in my company? I have to define it. I have to define it before I can train it. Train it, invest, treat people with dignity and respect. And instead of thinking of our industry as a dead-end job, right? Joe, you alluded to this earlier on the panel. The folks at FCSI that know me, the tried true Mick story is, hey, the definition of the word restaurant is not hospitality. It's a place one goes to be restored. And restaurateur literally translates to restorer of soul. So if I treat my team, whether they're working on robots and AI, or whether they're working directly with the guest, whether they're in a ghost kitchen or a catering kitchen, or right in an open kitchen, whatever it might be, or they're on the Welbilt factory floor. I'm part of restoring somebody's whole being, right? And we're seeing this in Ukraine with food. We're seeing it across the United States with food and the global process. Here is this gift. If we start treating our people, to me, in that attitude of maybe we're just doing a burger, maybe we're doing something way fancier, my work makes a difference. That's why you're doing it. We treat people that way, train them, and pay them a livable wage. Guess what? In our experience, profit goes up, sales go up, performance goes up, and engagement goes up. It's a funny irony, and it's that simple, but it's not easy. I'll stop there. Thanks for tuning in. Patience.
Thank you, Rudy.
Can I add something there, Mike?
Yeah,
is that
go
right?
for it, Phil.
I just think you're exactly right, and I think you have to have people who love what they do and they have care in how they do it. And if it's a chef, I mean, I'm a baker. I bake in my spare time. When I'm baking, I put care and attention into it. I don't just throw it together. I love what I'm doing and I love the outcome. In our factories, the best people we have are the people who are really, really passionate about hitting the numbers, hitting the quality, sweeping the floor, all of that things. They really, really care about the environment. They care about the environment they live in, not the global environment. They care about their workspace, and those are the best people to have. And I find it's infectious. When you have somebody who is a true advocate of what they're doing together as a team, it brings more people in, but it also pushes the people who aren't in that group out. And I think that's a good thing as well, because you can't, and not everybody is right for everything. You have the right people for the right jobs.
Yeah, that's a both and for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Phil. I want to focus on sustainability here for a moment. Joe, let's look at climate change and sustainability and how it's influencing decision making in the future. What's your kind of overall view on the impact it's having on the sector? We've already talked a little bit about energy usage, but what do you think are the long-term impacts of sustainability and how we maybe are refocusing on how we operate kitchens?
Yeah, another big topic. I think there's a lot of different, there's a tug of war going on this issue, I think too, right? Because you've got, especially here in the US, there's sort of governmental oversight that is requiring new buildings in certain jurisdictions to not have any gas. So you're being instantly forced into an electrification conversation. I think that the problem with that is that's in conflict with the why, right? And Simon Sinek talks about start with why, right? I think at some point, if I knew that I was able to build a kitchen that was on an electric grid that was fully sustainable, in other words, we're not using any fossil fuels to create that electricity, then the system works and it makes sense and there's worth the conversation. And at some point, energy cost will go down. The reality is I'm building one of the largest all electric kitchens in North America. I shouldn't say kitchens, I should say series of kitchens. It's an 18-story building in San Jose, California. I've talked about it before. It's all electric, right? And as a chef, you just go, oh man, there's no gas. How are we going to grill a steak, right? Like, I mean, so there's this tug of war that's just natural with this conversation. Let's talk about the rest of sustainability though, because there's water usage conversations and reduction in water usage. There's just the overall general energy usage issues. I also think there has the missed piece of this conversation a lot of has to do with the food itself. Where are we sourcing the food? What are we doing with food waste? How are we, minimizing and the honest answer is composting. Everybody thinks composting is amazing. When you look at the pyramid of food waste and food sustainability, composting is like the very last thing you do just because you already screwed everything else up and had a lot of food to put back into the compost bin to create more soil. It's actually the least economical version of food sustainability that exists. And so, I think what it really comes down to, Michael, at the end of the day is consultants are wearing so many different hats, and at some point it's impossible to be everything to everyone. And I think at the speed in which we are trying to build these facilities, because it doesn't matter if you're in Northern California or in the Midwest or wherever back east, everybody wants the thing built tomorrow for the least amount that they can, right? Like that's just the way it works. We're skipping the steps to actually create real sustainability, which is we need experts to come in and help. And there's the well building standard and all these other, LEED and well and all these other things from the construction side. But the reality is we as consultants can't possibly do everything for everyone. And I think this is a missing piece in the industry is we need more collaboration with experts that can bring real solutions in to help, but at the speed in which we're working. And I think that's been the disconnect right now with bringing true sustainability into what we're trying to do. Pockets of it.
Yeah.
Pockets of it.
Let's bring Phil in there. How are you reappraising then how you're making equipment more sustainable for, as we've been talking about, for the next decade rather than the next few years?
I think Welbilt, like many manufacturers, tries to make things as cheaply as we can, which meet the requirements of our users and end customers. And as with many things, life has been getting cheaper and cheaper for many years, regardless of the wider cost on our community or our environment. Most recently, we've seen low-cost economies not become so low cost. We've seen the price of transport, the time of transport become a significant part of our unit price. And I think with automation, we've talked about automation. If you automate a process, an assembly process, a cooking process, you actually take out a large portion of the labor rate. So the labor rate, whether it's $5 or $50, is less important per unit. So we're very aware of that. In a lot of areas, we are regionalizing our production. So where we have a high demand, we'll manufacture much more closely to that high demand. We have factories all over the world for that purpose, which at the start is actually quite expensive. We end up splitting up our supply chain, splitting up our expertise, retraining different groups of individuals to effectively make the same product. But I think that the cost to the wider market, the wider environment will be lower if we regionalize our manufacturing, and that's what we're doing.
Well, thank you, Phil. Rudy, one key topic here that with implications towards sustainability is plant-based menus. And I'd just like to get a sense really from your clients and generally your kind of how you're viewing the industry. Do you think plant-based menus are going to continue to dominate and meat-based decline? Will we see a steady decline for meat-based or a very rapid one? Kind of what's your view on that?
To me, there's no doubt that plant-based products are going to continue to evolve. I think it's a growing segment. I think this is a trend, not a fad. The sheer now we are getting into global socioeconomic, systems issues here. But that said, we're going to, at some point, cattlemen please duck, we're going to run out of space for cattle or animal-based proteins, and plant-based is an unbelievably effective alternative for those of us willing to step into that picture. So to me, again, the short answer is trend, not fad. Absolutely, plant-based product is going to extend. Industries like resorts, specifically winter resorts, that are doing huge amounts of volume in dollars to consumers, very resistant to go to vegan, vegetarian product in the middle of a winter, give me meat, give me whatever. However, there's 20-25% of the population is moving to that product. So I think we need to take a look at this. I'd like, before I turn off my mic on this, I want to go back, if I may, to sustainability as a whole. We've got to, as an industry, step into the sustainability issue. Two things. We'll find a way to be profitable. We will find a way to be profitable. The good operators will figure out how to make money, to keep fighting minimum wage, to keep fighting recycling or composting or whatever the aspect is in production. We've got to go here. In the US, we're the second biggest economy in the whole country, right? Globally, we're probably close. So how do we look at, Joe, this goes back to your whole integrated piece. How do we be sustainable in all we do? And then the touch point is, okay, well, I'm sustainable. We're separating out our stuff, but the city in which I'm operating isn't, right? Or the town. So how do we use our voice as an industry? I'll stop there, but this is a bigger must conversation 20 years out, 30 years out. We're running out of time and we're leaders. Let's do it.
Love that. Thank you very much, Rudy. I'd like to ask you all a final question then. Obviously, we've tackled some huge issues, some really seismic impacts that are affecting us at the moment. Let's talk about your general view about how positive you are for the future of food service, bearing in mind everything that we've experienced in the last 2 years, but also the last 10 years and kind of where it's going. Why should we be positive for the future of food service? And Joe, if you could answer first, please.
Well, I mean, look, a professor once said, I don't know who it was. You guys have heard this analogy 100 times, right? Like if you're in the business of, births, deaths, or feeding people, at some point you always have a job, right? Because that has to happen forever, right? So the reason I'm positive about it, and I think that there's a lot of excitement going on, is that we had huge momentum going into the pandemic, right? And you could argue that we hit a brick wall for 6 months, right? Boom, smacked right into it. It is what it is. But that momentum, it didn't stop. It just got picked back up and it got redirected a little bit. And I think we had a little deke in the road, but it wasn't like, it's not like we're just going to stop. And there's so many new things coming, and there's so many things being worked on. And yeah, they took a little hit, and yeah, we got knocked off the horse for a minute, whatever analogy you want to use. I think the reality is that people are excited about food. I think that I'm going to use one more quick thing that I think about a lot, right? So 15 years ago, why did everybody start going to culinary school? 20 years ago, why did people start going to culinary school? Because of Food Network and Food TV, right? Look at the shows that are on Food Network and Food TV today, and how many of them are more like talk shows and, a little more like real about what's going on in the food industry. Whereas 20 years ago, those shows were all about, hey, you can make $1 million and you can be rich and you can be a famous chef and you can be on TV. And that's why people went to culinary school. I think reality is set in a little bit for what the industry is. And now we're going out and bringing people in that are from the business world, from the finance world, from robotics, from engineering, from AI, and we're pulling those people in droves to help us move the industry forward. If that doesn't get you excited about where we're going, then cool, you maybe chose the wrong path. Go to births or deaths.
Rudy, are you similarly excited about the future?
I am thrilled about the future. I think that we have, yes, to Joe's point, everybody has to eat. And the opportunity, I think what really excites me now is with the different ages, with the education that's out there, with the equipment that's being, and the technology, all of the opportunity for delivery. How do I want to execute getting this piece of food to my guest, to my customer? There's so many options. And the other piece that everybody on the panel has talked about is this is an industry to be proud of. We deliver sustenance, right? And however you want to, whether we're putting a bolt in a piece of equipment on a shop floor or delivering the final product to our customer, it's a really, really amazing business. And it moves faster than any other industry I can think of. The time is to say yes and to manage everything more effectively. I'll stop there.
Great stuff. Thank you, Rudy. Same question to you as well, please, Phil.
Absolutely. I think change is for the good. I think that change always provokes a response. We need to make sure it's a positive response. The downturn was significant for us. We had huge challenges in the downturn to deal with, but we've come back bigger and stronger and more aware of our weaknesses. We've gotten into making appliances specifically for some of these emerging food items. So we're now working with products, equipment that's specifically designed to cook non-animal protein. We have appliances for that type of thing. We're very aware of the requirement in some kitchens to separate the vegan and the non-vegan, get rid of the cross-contamination challenges, think about the sensitivities of vegan consumers who don't want the same appliance cooking a hamburger as cooking their synthetic meat burger. And I think that's going to be the biggest change. You're going to see more and more people, the people who love the taste of meat, who don't like the thought of it coming from a cow, are going to convert in their droves to meat alternatives. Now they're going to get something that actually tastes like a meat alternative rather than tasting like a bean burger. So I think you're going to see more and more of that. So no, very positive. I think our segment is going to continue to grow and be very, 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 very effective.
Outstanding. Thank you very much, Phil. What an optimistic point to draw a close upon. A very enlightening debate from some genuine thought leaders on this topic. I hope it's restored a bit of soul for you too. Rudy, Joe and Phil, huge thanks for joining us today. I'd like to thank Welbilt for their continued support. Thank you for watching. Please stay tuned to fcsi.org for future events. Thank you.